So fundamental to being able to use the box model is actually understanding it. Basically, to a browser, any tag's a box with something inside it. It may have text, it may have an image, or even other tags containing other things. Things that you might not see but are there and help to control and align the different elements that you have on your page. Basically, the content are different properties that make up the box. So let's go ahead and let's look at this graphic right here. This kind of illustrates what's going on with the box model. Basically, you have the content area, which is in the middle of the box. Then you have padding, and padding is basically the distance from the content inside the box to the border of the box. The border is basically a setting that you can set thickness, style, and color. And then you have margin. And margin is something where you can set the distance between this box and then adjacent elements on the page. So a simple way of thinking of these properties is that the margin pushes outward from the border and the padding pushes inward from the border. Because a box has four sides, properties associated with margin, border, and padding each have four settings. They have top, right, bottom, and left. So basically, a box is going to have these different sides that you can style, and then by using padding, border, and margin, you can go ahead and you can define the associated sides and learn about and define the associated properties that are particular to each of those. So let's go ahead and start by doing that. This is the web page that we're going to be working on, and basically it's just paragraphs, an image, an ordered list, and that's pretty much it. So if we go and we look at the code, you can see that the code is fairly simple. I start with an H3 tag, I have a paragraph tag, here's my image tag, and then I have a ordered list, as I mentioned, and then I end with another paragraph. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to set some CSS attributes to be able to control what's happening on our page right here. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to basically zero out all of the margin and padding that's associated with the page. I definitely recommend that you do this on any web page that you're going to be working with, because basically different browsers are going to go ahead and add different amounts of default space to specific tags. And you might not be really certain what that default space might be. So I believe that the easiest thing to do is simply to use our universal selector and just zero those things out right off the bat. So of course we're going to use our little asterisk, which is the universal selector, and then I'm just going to go ahead and set my margin to 0, and I don't have to say pixels or anything like that, I can just say 0, and set the padding as well to 0. So now if we save and we refresh our page, you're going to see that we're no longer going to have spacing between these different elements, and we're no longer going to have spacing on the right or left. So let's just reload the page, and now you can see how everything gets shoved to the upper left hand corner of our web page. I no longer have a extra space between my paragraphs, between my header, between just about anything. I have a little bit of space on my image, but my image itself does have some white space around the outside. So I don't know if you can actually see that, but if I kind of move this, you can see how it has a little bit of white space. So that's actually what's creating the space between my image and the paragraph above and below. So now that we've zeroed out those things, let's go ahead and I'm going to just define a style for my font as well. So I'll just define this on the body, which will basically affect all of my tags. And since I want all of my tags throughout my web page to be using the same font family, I'll go ahead and I'll define this on the body. So I'm just going to set that to 0, or to Verdana or a sans serif. And let's see, oh, I guess it's not a font. What kind of spelling was that? Let's try spelling that correctly, and we'll save and we'll refresh over here. And now you can see it changes everything's font. It also gets a little bigger because the sans serif fonts seem to look a little bit larger than the serif fonts. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to start creating some styles for the various boxes that are inside the page. So we'll just start with the H3 tag since it is at the top of the page. I'm going to go ahead and write a style for H3. I'm going to come in here and turn the border on. So I'll type border. And basically, when you're working with border, border has three associated properties. It has the width, and the width of the border, of course, is going to be the thickness of the border. The width values that you can use are thin, medium, thick, or any unit, and that would be ems, pixels, percentages, whatever. The next property is style, and you have tons of styles that you can choose from for the border. You can include styles of none, hidden, dotted, dashed, solid, double, groove, ridge, inset, or outset. And then finally you have color. So what we can do with the border is we can go ahead and we can define the border styles separately or all together. So if I go ahead and type border dash style, and then I go ahead and define the attribute, I would need to go ahead and put a border dash color and define a color, and I'll just pick a color. And then I would need to also define the border dash width, and I would need to specify some sort of width. I'm just going to use 5 pixels. If I save my page and we refresh in the browser, you're going to now see that my H3 tag up at the top of my web page has a dashed border. It's 5 pixels, and it is this green color right here. So it does take on the property specified. Now, this can be a little tedious to write all of these things out. In addition to writing out like this, you also have control over the various sizes. Not the sizes, but the sides of the element, because remember, a box has 4 sides. So like if we come to border style, you can go ahead and you can specify that the top of the border is dashed, and the right hand side is going to be solid, and the bottom is going to be double, and the, I don't know, left hand side, let's just put inset. So I can put all these values, and if I'm setting a declaration like this, I don't have to separate these things with commas, I just write them out. Because of how you set up your styling, like borders, and this is actually true for padding and margin as well, the borders are always going to be applied in the order of top, right, bottom, left. So as we specify these, this is going to be top, right, bottom, and left. And you can use this kind of shorthand styling, which makes your declarations much easier to specify, as opposed to saying border style top, border style right, border style left, and you would of course separate all of those. Like if I wanted to define border style left, I would type border dash style dash left, but it's too much writing to write those out, so this shorthand method is obviously much more interesting. A quick way of remembering the order in which you need to apply these things is just think, if I don't apply these in the right order, I'm going to get in trouble. And if we just come over here in our web page and write the word trouble, you can probably remember top, right, bottom, left. So that's just a little shortcut for you to remember that. I'm going to save my page right here, and let's go ahead and refresh this. And you'll notice now that every side of my box has a different sort of border associated with it. So the top is dashed, the right side is solid, the bottom is double lined, and this left line is inset, which kind of creates more of like a beveled type of look. It's a little hard to see since this tag is pushed so close to the edge. So let's go ahead and let's create a little bit of space around the edge there. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set the margin dash top to, let's just use like 20 pixels for now. I'll use a fixed value, and I'm going to go ahead and set my margin dash left to 20 pixels as well, and this will just kind of push that header tag away from the edge right there. I'm going to save this, and we'll refresh this, and now you can see I have a little space, so you can definitely see what the edge looks like. If I want edge over here on the right hand side, I would need to set a margin on the right as well. So if I go ahead and set a margin right, and let's just make that 10 pixels, and I save and refresh, you can now see what all the edges look like on the box that's associated with the H3 tag. So this is really nice to be able to have all of this really refined control with, creating borders on a particular object. I'm going to go ahead and give my object a background color because I want to point out something to you. So I'm going to go ahead and just set the background color, and let's just pick a gray or something like that. And I'll save my page, and if I save and we look at this, you can see how the background color goes to the edge of the border. It always will do that. The background is going to basically fill the edge of the border. Now our margin, remember, as we talked about here, is the spacing from the border to the next tag, and I didn't define any margin on the bottom, but since there's no tag on the left or on the top, it basically goes to the edge of the page. So I have 20 pixels from the top of the page to the border. That's margin right there. This is margin spacing over here, as is this over here on the right. I define that to be 10, so it's a little more narrow. If we go ahead and add some padding to this, you're going to see that the content is going to be pushed away from the edge of the box. So let's go ahead and let's add a little bit of padding in here. I'm going to go ahead and define my padding, and I'm just going to keep the padding uniform all the way around. So I'll just define that as being 5 pixels. If we refresh the page now, you're going to see how I have a little bit of spacing, 5 pixels to be exact, around the inside edge of my box. So remember, the padding is going to be the distance from the content to the border. Padding always goes on the inside of the box, border is the edge of the box, and then margin is the outside of the box. So these are important concepts to go ahead and think about when we're styling our different tags right here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set the font size, and I'll use a font size of 1.5 ems for this particular box right here, and I'm going to change my background color to something that's going to kind of work a little bit better with what I want to illustrate later on. So I happen to know what the hex value is. I'm going to also change my border color because I just kind of picked some random colors. So let me just plug in those values real quick. And these are not web safe values, so that's why they have very funky hexadecimal codes. If we refresh now, you can see how now I have a light green interior and a darker green exterior. I'm also going to change my border, and instead of specifying the border style, the border color, and the border width as we did before, I'm just going to go ahead and do a shorthand styling. I'm going to go ahead and define all the properties of the border, and since I want them to be the same all the way around, I can just go ahead and use border, and I'm going to go ahead and set the border to 5 pixels. I'm going to put a space, I'm going to go ahead and set it to a double line, and then I'm going to go ahead and set the color for my border. Okay. My semicolon in there and save my page, and we'll refresh over here, and now you can see what I get is something that's a little more defined, more uniform. As I increase or decrease the size of my web page, you can see that the box for the H3 tag is going to grow, and it is going to grow because I never defined that to be any particular size. It basically is going to take up the entire web page. It does have a little bit of space on the left and on the right because of the margin settings that I set, but it will take up the whole web page. If I specifically go in here and set the width of this box, I can go ahead and I can lock down the actual size of the box. So if I set the width to be, and let's just set the width in ems for right now, I'll go ahead and put, actually instead of ems, let's use percent, let's use 75%. That'll work better. I'm going to go ahead and reload. Now the size of my box is going to be a relative size. It's going to be 75% of the width of the page, and you can see how that shrinks and grows depending on how wide or narrow my web page might be. So these are all important things to think about when we're thinking about utilizing border when we're thinking about the size of the box, and how these things are going to interact with each other are going to be a little bit different depending on the other tags that you're going to go ahead and do. So we'll take a short break and we'll come back and we'll keep working on this exercise.